Okay, I'll be honest. I didn't expect us to return to the world of zombie games so quickly. Certainly not in this crazy turn of events. But the bat signals were put out, and I am a detective of the people, so a case must be solved. It's practically only days after, the day before launched, in December of 2023, and the company behind the game has already folded under the pressure of their newly failed multiplayer launch. There are some questions as to why, but more so, there are questions to how we even got here in the first place. How did the day before manage to become one of the most hyped games on all of Steam, only to launch to a resounding thud? On this episode of Death of a Game, we cover one of the fastest falls from grace, if you can even call it that. Pay attention to the clues and bits of evidence along the way as the timeline unfolds, and stay tuned to the end of the video for everyone's favorite final deduction. Well, detectives, there might not seem that much mystery on the surface of things, but sometimes just below the surface of a still pond lies a vast expanse of more unknown. That mystery will be uncovered and more. Let's get to the case. I would like to welcome this video's sponsor, Star Trek Fleet Command. Star Trek Fleet Command is a cross-play game available on PC and mobile devices with a Scopely account. This allows players to seamlessly transition between gaming at home or on the move with your mobile device and syncing your gameplay. Recruit iconic characters from the Next Generation, the original series, and the J.J. Abrams films, Discovery, and more, including Kirk, Spock, Michael Burnham, Data, and Geordi. Build powerful ships including the USS Enterprise, the Romulan Warbird, and the Klingon Bird of Prey. Join millions of other players, forge alliances to defeat your enemies, and conquer territories. The game is free, and every month new events and content is being added to the game. For example, there are some new TNG officers, such as Luther Sloan, the fleet commander, such as the highly skilled Riker, and finally the compassionate Deanna. There's new features such as the Wave Defense mode, which introduces a whole other way to play the game, and new missions. Download Star Trek Fleet Command using the link in my description. Once in game, go to your player profile, open settings, and choose General, and sign up for your Scopely account. Then go to the official website, StarTrekFleetCommand.com, and click the store icon on the header to log in with your Scopely account to visit the web store. Once you're in the store, access promo codes on the left-hand side of the menu, open the promo codes page, and lastly enter that code WARPSPEED to redeem your rewards. Once your rewards are successfully redeemed, you will be able to see them once you go back to your game, but you must redeem them before reaching level 10. This pack includes 10 epic shards of Kirk. So remember to use the link in the description, the QR code on screen, and use the promo code WARPSPEED for your new player content pack for Star Trek Fleet Command. Thank you for sponsoring this video, Star Trek Fleet Command. The story of the day before actually begins with Fantastic's previous game, or what used to be their previous game, Wild 8. Fantastic is often credited for developing and launching Wild 8, which had a modicum of success. However, Fantastic, according to the publisher, actually lost control of development to Hype Train Digital, who then, alongside the publisher, cut ties completely with Fantastic. Well, or they reportedly just changed their name, but stay tuned later for more on that. This is a wrinkle some might have missed in the story of what is to come. Wild 8 would launch regardless, October 3rd, 2019, and bring Hype Train Digital some success. How much of the game was worked on by Fantastic is not known, but their ambitions would only grow after working on a top-down survival game. The day before would be announced 2021, with a launch date set for later in the next year. From the trailer, the day before was looking like a proper zombie simulator multiplayer game, seemingly offering you the ability to carry out what life would be like for a survivor in a zombie apocalypse. The trailer was really enough to get people excited for what was to come despite showing very little actual gameplay, as if we had suddenly regressed 10 years. The day before would be delayed from 2022 to 2023, which wasn't totally surprising because very little gameplay had been shown and the beta hadn't even happened yet. According to Fantastic, the delay was largely regarding the transition from Unreal 4 to Unreal Engine 5. At this point in time, the day before had climbed to the top of Steam's most wishlisted titles. This was just bizarre for me. I get a nice trailer driving up hype, but the day before was garnering more hype than games from proven studios and even iterative and successful games. This trailer was basically walking around interacting with objects in a stale-looking abandoned world. But the day before and their team had done a masterful job of creating hype for their yet-proven game. This was a good thing in the sense that they would have a built-in audience and excitement for their title once ready for launch. The problem would be raising expectations to unhealthy levels they could never possibly satisfy. Rumblings would happen in the summer of 2022 concerning the team working on the day before. For such a hyped title and such an ambitious game design, it was going to take a serious development team to make things work. The problem being the day before was being developed with volunteer workers. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with a true indie developer approach of utilizing volunteer workers, right? I'm not trying to look down on them, but this isn't an indie title, right? This isn't being sold as an indie title. The day before is being sold as a blockbuster zombie simulator title, and fans were understandably concerned after hearing that many of the developers working on the title weren't being paid. The confusing part of this for me is that the day before had a successful publisher, one who was capable of funding them in their development through their success in mobile publishing and development, and who had published previous games with them already. So something just wasn't adding up literally. The day before would slip to the second most wishlisted game by January of 2023. And then the game was delayed again. Fantastic, labeled as a Singaporean-based studio, would delay the day before yet again, this time citing trademark disputes. These disputes would even force the game to be delisted from Steam, which made them feel like anything but minor disputes. Being delisted while being the second most wishlisted game was certainly a thing that happened. There was a healthy stream of skepticism being produced by those following the media cycle of the day before. But sometimes mob mentality can override skepticism, as some fans just really want things to work out. Simulation-style games, or MMOs, as the day before was being dubbed by Fantastic, can tend to be a bit more addictive and all-encompassing titles, producing a far more loyal or hardcore fanbase. People wanting the day before to be a successful zombie MMO was understandable from a wishful thinking perspective, but the game, by the same year they were promising their launch in, had yet to show a single shred of an MMO feature, so it wasn't anything but wishful thinking. Gameplay would finally be revealed February 2nd, 2023, and in a typical fashion following the bizarre news cycle already present, things would go on equally as bizarre. The gameplay footage seemed to be a bit much of the same footage that was already shown before, but just in more detail. The controversy was they promised actual gameplay, but seemed to showcase only doctored footage. The reveal would go on for 10 minutes before another reveal would be mentioned and showcase actual gameplay for 30 seconds. The day before was set to launch later in the same year, and yet only comfortable showing 30 seconds of developer-led gameplay of the same area in the trailer that it was based in. That wasn't a good sign, and something that I learned early on in my journey through video gaming as a video game tester, developer, and player is if a developer is not willing to show off their gameplay publicly, there's always a good reason. It's even worse when you consider that November was the launch date and was actually twice delayed, with the previous date being only a month after the gameplay reveal in March. Beta for the day before would be announced in April of 2023 for some time later in the year. This would be the first time the public would play the title who had only seen minutes of gameplay previously. With the beta release would also be the return to Steam for the day before. The day before would finally launch December 7th, 2023, after being delayed multiple times and having quite the dramatic development. This was Fantastic's moment to set the record straight, and rocky start or not, they could still impress everyone and hit a home run. Instead, what happened was arguably the worst failure we had ever seen on this channel of over 100 episodes, and that's saying something, right? IGN would review the supposed zombie MMO and would rate the title a shockingly low 1 out of 10. To complete my sports baseball analogy, that's like hitting the ball up in the air for a pop fly, it hitting a bird that then flies into some type of device that then explodes into the crowd, murdering everyone, and then all of a sudden the game just ends and yeah, and then baseball's outlawed. IGN had this to say about their 1 out of 10 review of The Day Before. The Day Before is easily one of the worst games I've ever played, to the point where I'm afraid to continue to keep running it on my PC. Sure, you could say that there are bones of something coherent here, but even those bones feel splintered and brittle. Its map is lifeless, its enemies are idiotic, its PvP is an exploitable mess, its story is pointless, and its progression is downright infuriating. IGN seemingly found absolutely nothing redeemable for the title, which was a shocking damnation. This was an outlet that was rather nice whenever giving reviews. The Day Before's failure would be so great, only selling 201,000 copies with about half or more of them being refunded. That would result in Fantastic shutting down altogether, citing that The Day Before had failed financially and they lacked the funds to continue, and all income was being used to pay off the debts and their partners. Merely days after launching The Day Before, man, there's a lot of day analogies in this video, Fantastic would reportedly shut down, but the story wouldn't end there. Within days, there were mumblings that perhaps Fantastic hadn't gone anywhere, and was attempting to change their name to avoid heat and continue making and selling games. 8 Points, a company with history only tied to the Wild 8, as the name implies, the previous survival title that I mentioned, would sprout up again after being a dormant company name for a time. There are some quotes that show that 8 Points was a prior name of Fantastic, which calls things into question, certainly. At least the story isn't as black and white, as perhaps the companies actually did split from each other, but their connected history makes it seem like otherwise. According to Hype Chain Digital, the publisher for the Wild 8, the name change was due to the Wild 8 getting review bombed by angry Day Before customers. If it was about another game receiving proxy pushback, then maybe you should just claim that. And just claim that Fantastic was not the developer involved. Instead, you helped perpetuate that there were 2 different companies and actually allowed for the detectives like those watching this video to go search around and find some stuff, which ended up seemingly pointing towards guilty. I mean, the press release I cited is even signed by one of the brother founders, which at least implies that he was a part of the company even after they changed names originally. How much Fantastic was involved in the Wild 8 remains to be seen, but they either got kicked off the development of the project, or they were hiding their presence and changing their name, which means that these are 2 not very good options. And Fantastic was reportedly located in Singapore. Or were they? A reporter named Aloysius Lowe would visit the reported Fantastic studio in Singapore, or where the studio was supposed to be. What he found instead was that it actually wasn't their studio, and that it merely was the address that they were using for their virtual office and studio. Diving into their financials, and you find out that they don't even employ or pay anyone in Singapore at all, actually. But wait, there's even more bizarre findings, like both directors, aka the brothers Edward Kotovtsev and his brother Asen, being paid as much as $200,000 each, and $300,000 being spent on travel expenses. I mean, that's like private jet trips all the time. Fantastic was able to secure a loan and had as much as $1.4 million in the bank, sort of debunking the not having enough funds to continue claim, at least on the surface. So much about the whole ordeal was just shady, besides just the crappy game. The worst case scenario, this was one giant funding scheme to just get paid and then ride off into the sunset with other people's money. The final thing that I want to cover is the way that The Day Before was being sold, and was sold. The Day Before, since inception, was sold as an MMO, a zombie simulator like MMO. This is a very lofty ambition for a development team, especially one without any AAA experience. But even though The Day Before hobbled to launch, the MMO parts they kept advertising and teasing, and they never outright showed, were nowhere to be seen. And as I have been saying for years now, this is why perception of your game matters so much. Fantastic, by calling their game an MMO, built a high expectation of what players would expect, and instead players got what was essentially a lobby game, if that. For people thinking this doesn't matter, well, take a gander at the negative reviews on The Day Before and notice that that's one of the biggest cited issues. There's more though. A former Fantastic dev would actually anonymously claim that no one from the dev team actually knows why they called it an MMO. It was always a third-person shooter with some co-op mechanics. Not one RPG mechanic was implemented. Skills were an idea, and they were in the prototype stage, but nothing more. He went on to further state that, technically speaking, there were no RPG mechanics implemented. There was no possible way to put a lot of people in the world or make the world bigger, and from the beginning, the idea was that the servers would be under 100 people. That is not an MMO. No clans, no raids, and closed hubs. It's been that way for over 2 years. But that's not where things ended. The source would also claim that anyone who complained too much was kicked off the team. A lot of the stupid ideas were implemented, removed, and then re-implemented because the brothers thought that they knew better than us about what people wanted. A huge amount of time and work was wasted because jobs had to be done and then redone. So the team behind the day before was facing pretty hostile conditions, with both founders lacking credibility or portfolios to even give game development advice, but actively ruining parts of development as well, without much way to speak up and likely not being paid much or at all. The day before and Fantastic or 8 Points, whichever name they switched to, were creations from the Katovstead brothers that didn't just seem like over-ambitions that failed, but attempts to make money without having to back up what you sell. Some would call this fraud or at least false advertisement. I call it the perfect way to kill your career. I mean, I wish I could say that they would learn from their mistakes, but only days after, before being scrubbed off the internet, Fantastic would respond to disenfranchised fans claiming that, well, shit happens. Yeah, shit did happen. It was both this game and Fantastic's handling of the entire thing. The music is playing and it's hard not to just sit and enjoy it, right? But that music playing means the case has come to an end and we are ready to solve things in our final deduction. If you haven't been paying attention, or just for dramatic effect, why did the day before fail so epically that the creators went incognito? Performance issues and buggy gameplay. A boring open world and gameplay loop. Poor development logistics. False advertising. A poor multiplayer experience, no voice chat, poor menus, zero narrative or world reasons to care or do anything. I don't think it's out of the questions to say that we might see the Katovstead brothers again in some sort of amalgamation. They have the money and are ambitious to make video games no matter the morals apparently, but I think that the lesson to be learned from the day before is not that some unsavory developers can exist, and sometimes they can con you, but in this case, the world was conned with very little. In the end, because people wanted to live out their Walking Dead fantasies, they were willing to look past any of the optics and past any actual signs of quality. This is worrying for me because in 2023 we still have games that are being falsely sold as MMOs to a great degree. Worst of all, they are working at roping people in. Remember, for online worlds and games to function, you must be able to observe them in their natural environments, when functioning with multiplayer actors. That's why it's so crucial to have closed and open testing as an online RPG or game. The red flag for detectives in all of this should have just been that. There was nearly nothing to show and nearly no public testing done. A horrible sign for an online game. I wish I could say that this video and this game could be the last game to teach people this lesson. But sadly, I will cover many more titles like this on my channel that will continue to collectively teach us more lessons as a humanity. Thanks for watching, and happy holidays everybody.